Oliver Barrett was a man no one suspected, quiet, ordinary, invisible. Yet behind that unremarkable facade, he built Britain's most ruthless drug empire, earning the terrifying nickname, the Phantom. For years he controlled the streets without ever being caught, until one betrayal shattered his world, and exposed secrets that shook the entire nation. For over a decade, the name the Phantom echoed through Britain's criminal underworld like a warning. A name no one had ever seen, spoken to, or even confirmed to be real. And yet he was everywhere. From the dim, rain-soaked corners of East London to the pristine neighborhoods of Surrey, his influence spread like smoke, invisible, yet impossible to ignore. Police described him as Britain's most elusive drug lord. Criminals spoke of him in hushed tones, afraid that even uttering his name might bring trouble. Every lead ended in silence. Every surveillance tape came up blank. The Phantom didn't make mistakes. He didn't appear on wiretaps. His fingerprints were never found on any packet. It was as if he didn't exist. But the drugs kept coming. Cocaine, MDMA, heroin, ketamine, all arriving in coordinated shipments that seemed immune to police detection. Prices stayed low, supply remained constant. And yet, no one could point to the man in charge. Scotland Yard launched special task forces. MI5 even got involved at one point. Hundreds of hours were spent reviewing footage, tapping phones and tracking suspects, all of it leading to dead ends. The Phantom was careful, meticulous, and terrifyingly efficient. He didn't need to be seen to be in control. While rival gangs spilled blood over turf wars, the Phantom remained untouched, untouchable. He wasn't interested in territory or power displays. His operation was about precision. He ran his empire like a corporation, quiet, profitable, and deeply protected. Those who crossed him disappeared. Those who worked for him followed rules so strict, even speaking his name was forbidden. Rumors swirled. He was ex-intelligence, or former special forces, or maybe even a high-ranking police officer himself. But no one knew for sure, and that's what made him powerful. Meanwhile, the streets suffered. Overdoses rose. Turf wars intensified. And through it all, a single truth remained. Someone was pulling the strings. Someone was supplying the poison, getting rich from chaos and staying 2 steps ahead of everyone. Law enforcement included. Journalists tried to dig, gang members feared to speak, and the myth of the Phantom only grew stronger. In the shadows of Britain's cities, a ghost ruled the drug trade. Not with violence, but with silence. Not with chaos, but with control. And for years, no one even knew where to start looking. Oliver Barrett was the kind of man no one noticed. He lived in a modest 3-bedroom semi-detached home in the quiet town of Maidstone, Kent. He mowed his lawn every Saturday. He smiled politely at neighbors. He worked as an IT consultant, mostly from home, and never raised suspicion. No flashy clothes, no fast cars, no strange visitors at odd hours. On paper he was completely ordinary, even boring, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Oliver had spent years crafting a perfect disguise, a life so unremarkable that it never drew attention. He paid his taxes on time. He donated to charity. He even volunteered once a month at a local food bank, earning him quiet praise from the community. No one imagined that behind his quiet exterior was the mastermind of one of the largest drug empires in British history. While detectives chased violent gang leaders and high-profile dealers, the real architect of the operation was quietly sipping tea in his garden, reading manuals on data encryption. His genius wasn't in brute strength or charisma. It was in understanding the system. Oliver had no criminal background, no connections to known offenders, and no reason for law enforcement to look his way, but he was always watching them. He studied how police operations worked, read declassified case files and followed trial transcripts. He even tracked drug busts across the UK, not to celebrate their failures, but to learn from the mistakes others had made. Every raid, every arrest, every slip-up became part of his playbook. Oliver didn't meet dealers in person. He didn't touch drugs. He built firewalls of secrecy around himself, using layers of intermediaries who didn't know who they were really working for. Fake companies, digital contracts, offshore accounts, all orchestrated from a single laptop hidden in a false panel beneath his living room floor. He used encrypted chat servers and one-time communication relays, changing his digital footprint every 48, and if something even smelled like a risk, he shut it down instantly, no hesitation. While other criminals chased status, Oliver chased invisibility. He didn't want power in the streets, he wanted control behind the scenes. His true strength came from being underestimated. In a world where police were searching for monsters, Oliver made sure he looked like nothing more than a man next door. Oliver Barrett didn't need to sell drugs on street corners or flash stacks of cash on social media. He understood early on that real power didn't come from being seen. It came from controlling what others couldn't trace. His drug empire operated like a multinational corporation, and he was its silent CEO. From his modest home in Kent, he ran a network so complex, even seasoned investigators struggled to understand how it all connected. At the heart of his operation was a system built on layers. No one person had the full picture. Couriers believed they were delivering documents for a legal consultancy. Chemists who prepared the narcotics were under the impression they were manufacturing products for the pharmaceutical industry, and the tech support team maintaining his communication infrastructure thought they were working for a private cybersecurity firm. Every role was compartmentalized. Every detail was need to know. Oliver relied heavily on encrypted communication platforms, most of them developed by former employees from the dark web markets. He paid top dollar for private servers hosted overseas, rotating them regularly and using burner laptops for short bursts of time before wiping them completely. Each device was used once and discarded. He ran simulations to test police tracking tactics and adjusted his systems accordingly. His favorite method of communication was using modified GPS coordinates in seemingly harmless messages, texts that looked like food delivery addresses, but were actually drop-off points. Shipments came in hidden inside electronics, toys, even furniture. Oliver used shipping companies that handled thousands of packages a day, making it nearly impossible to trace individual deliveries. Money moved just as smoothly. Payments came in through cryptocurrency, funneled through shell charities, phony tech startups, and fake e-commerce sites. He created virtual storefronts that processed thousands of small purchases each week, laundering millions without ever raising alarms. The beauty of Oliver's empire was its subtlety. There were no flashy gang signs or turf wars. His drugs were cleaner, cheaper, and more reliable than anyone else's, making him the preferred supplier for both low-level dealers and high-end traffickers. They didn't know who he was, and they didn't care. All that mattered was that the product arrived on time, every time. Behind his quiet smile and neatly trimmed lawn, Oliver Barrett had built a fortress of lies so well constructed that even his closest associates didn't know who they were truly working for. He didn't need to be feared. He only needed to be unknown. As Oliver Barrett's drug empire expanded, so did its grip on the streets. But unlike the bloody turf wars seen in other criminal networks, his rise brought a colder kind of fear, calculated, quiet, and surgical. Violence didn't erupt in broad daylight. It came in whispers. People disappeared without a trace. Rivals suffered accidents that were never questioned. Informants stopped speaking, often permanently, yet nothing ever pointed back to Oliver. He never held a weapon, never issued a threat directly. He simply ensured that those who posed a threat were removed cleanly and without noise. This methodical cruelty earned him a reputation, even if no one knew his name. Word spread that there was a power above the gangs, someone who didn't play by traditional rules. Some believed he was part of a secret organization. Others thought he was protected by someone at the highest levels of law enforcement. But the truth was far more chilling. Oliver had built a system that didn't require loyalty, just obedience, and those who didn't follow the rules vanished. He never recruited from gangs, he avoided people with violent pasts or unstable tendencies. Instead, he found specialists, accountants, coders, logistics experts, people who needed money, not power. He offered them anonymity, high pay, and one rule: never ask questions. Most didn't. They were given tasks, not names. And if they got caught, they knew nothing that could lead back to him. In the criminal underworld, fear usually comes from brute force, but Oliver introduced a new kind: the fear of the unknown. No one knew what he looked like. No one knew where he was. Yet everyone knew he could reach them if he wanted to. The mystery of the Phantom became his greatest weapon. Even police officers working the case admitted off the record that they'd never seen anything like it. There were no patterns, no weaknesses, just an expanding empire and a growing trail of silence. Meanwhile, Oliver remained calm, composed, and always watching. He studied news reports about drug busts he had orchestrated as distractions. He planted misinformation through fake online tips to confuse investigators, and as police scrambled from one false lead to the next, Oliver continued to tighten his grip, not with chaos, but with control. His empire didn't roar, it whispered, and in those whispers he ruled with terrifying precision. The break that police had been chasing for years came not from an elite task force or a deep undercover sting, but from a simple mistake. In early 2018, a low-level courier was arrested during a routine stop in Manchester. His van had no drugs, no weapons, just 2 duffel bags full of unmarked cash. It looked like another low-tier mule, replaceable, forgettable. But during a search at the station, officers found something curious: a small thumb drive hidden in the courier's sock, wrapped in electrical tape. The contents weren't immediately alarming. Encrypted files, mostly gibberish. But buried inside was one video file. Rough, low quality, only 23 seconds long. It showed a man in a dark hoodie, sitting in a warehouse, lit by a single bulb. His face was obscured. His voice had been digitally distorted. But he was giving orders, short and direct, referring to times, locations, and product weights. Nothing in the clip directly tied him to drugs, but the tone was clinical, confident, someone in control. For most, it would have been a dead end, but one detail stood out. In the background, a faint sound, a train horn, long and low, unmistakable to transport experts. Investigators isolated the audio and identified the exact model: an Austrian-built locomotive, only used on select European routes. After cross-referencing train schedules with visual clues in the video, analysts narrowed the location down to a cargo yard in Vienna. That changed everything. For the first time, authorities knew the Phantom wasn't just operating in the UK, he was coordinating movements across borders. Surveillance agencies across Europe were put on alert. Interpol began monitoring financial transfers in and out of known shipping hubs. Still, Oliver stayed one step ahead. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was a UK-based courier carrying a video linked to Austria? Was it an intentional drop, a warning, or had the courier been a liability, planted with traceable evidence as a test? Even within the investigative team, theories clashed. Some believed it was a breadcrumb meant to mislead. Others were convinced it was the first real glimpse of the Phantom's hand. Regardless of intent, the message was clear. This wasn't a local operation. It was international, sophisticated, and still far beyond the reach of British law enforcement. The ghost had left a shadow, but the man himself remained out of sight. In 2020, just as investigators were beginning to connect distant dots across Europe, the first true crack in Oliver Barrett's empire came from within. A man known only by his alias, Jay, was arrested during a large-scale drug raid in Liverpool. He wasn't a foot soldier or a courier. He was something more. Digital ledgers found in his flat showed consistent high-volume transfers that pointed to deep involvement in the distribution network. When pressed, Jay remained silent. For nearly 6 weeks, he said nothing. Then something shifted. Faced with a lengthy prison sentence, Jay offered a deal: But what he revealed went far beyond provide names or locations. He exposed an entire system. He explained how the empire was structured, how communications were encrypted, and most importantly, how Oliver had managed to stay ahead of every single investigation. Jay claimed that the Phantom wasn't just avoiding law enforcement, he had infiltrated it. According to Jay, Oliver had people on the inside. Not many, just a few strategically placed individuals within lower levels of police departments, border control and even data processing teams. They weren't high-ranking officials, just overlooked employees with access to sensitive information. In exchange for bribes, they passed along crucial intel, upcoming raids, surveillance targets, and flagged shipments. Oliver knew when to pull back, when to move, and when to let competitors take the fall. Jay's account painted a chilling picture. For years, Oliver had been using law enforcement as a shield, manipulating them into clearing the field of competition while his own operation grew untouched. When rivals were taken down in dramatic raids, it was often because Oliver had tipped off the police himself, feeding them just enough to keep their attention elsewhere. Meanwhile, his own network stayed silent, fluid, and untouched. But Jay's motive wasn't justice, it was revenge. One of the men killed in a mysterious deal gone wrong 2 years earlier had been his cousin, caught in a trap set by Oliver. Jay had been loyal, efficient, and trusted until that betrayal. Now he wanted to bring it all down. With Jay's information, investigators began to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just a drug empire, it was a shadow government of sorts, operating with its own rules, protections, and intelligence network. For the first time, they had a clear target, but hitting it would be another story entirely. In early 2021, armed with the information Jay had provided, law enforcement agencies across Europe launched a coordinated strategy to trap Oliver Barrett. The operation had to be flawless, not only to catch a man who had never been seen but to avoid tipping him off. Every move was calculated in silence. A fake drug deal was staged in Brussels, carefully crafted to look like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, involving a high-volume shipment of synthetic drugs from Eastern Europe. Through channels Oliver had been known to monitor, whispers of the deal were planted, whispers designed to lure him in. The trap wasn't aimed at Oliver directly. Investigators knew he wouldn't appear in person, he never did. But they also knew he had trusted fixers who handled sensitive deals on his behalf. One of them, a man operating under the alias Markin, had been on MI5's watch list for years. He was known to manage logistics for large transactions, and had a reputation for disappearing before authorities could catch up. If Markin showed up, they were one step closer to the Phantom himself. Everything went according to plan. Markin arrived in Brussels, escorted by 2 unknown individuals, and met with undercover agents posing as suppliers. Hidden cameras recorded every interaction. The meeting was short but crucial. Documents were exchanged. Timelines were agreed upon. And most importantly, names were mentioned. First names, aliases, and one handwritten note containing an abbreviation, O. Barrett. As Markin boarded his return flight to the UK, authorities moved in. He was arrested at the gate, with a briefcase containing 5 burner phones, $120,000 in cash, and a small leather notebook filled with cryptic notes, codes, and transaction logs. Forensic teams immediately got to work. Inside one of the phones was a deleted message, with GPS coordinates linked to an industrial estate in Essex. One police had previously raided without success. This time, they knew where to look. What followed was the most extensive series of coordinated raids in UK drug enforcement history. Dozens of locations were hit simultaneously, safe houses were uncovered, storage units were emptied, computers were seized. For the first time, the pieces began to fall into place. Oliver Barrett was no longer just a name on a digital ledger. He was real, vulnerable, and within reach. Or so they thought, because just as the net began to close, Oliver vanished. The days following Markin's arrest brought the collapse of an empire built on shadows, armed with evidence from the restless sting, Police executed raids across 4 countries in a coordinated takedown that struck deep into the heart of Oliver Barrett's network. Storage units packed with narcotics, weapons and counterfeit documents were discovered. More than 30 individuals were arrested, including Oliver's tech team, logistics coordinators and financial handlers. Bank accounts were frozen, offshore shell companies dissolved, and millions of pounds in cryptocurrency seized. In Kent, investigators returned to the one place they had searched before, Oliver's home. On the surface, it was exactly the same. The garden was still tidy. His car, an old Audi A4, sat untouched in the driveway. But this time, officers came equipped with new intelligence and deeper knowledge of his methods. In the basement, hidden behind a false wall disguised as a utility shelf, they uncovered what they had long suspected, a private server farm, humming quietly in the darkness. The servers held the real story. Hundreds of gigabytes of encrypted communications, black market transaction logs, routing instructions, and contracts written in coded shorthand. Hidden folders revealed the structure of the entire operation. A business model, not a gang. There were rankings, profit margins, and territory assessments. Even more disturbing were files detailing competitors' weaknesses, personal data on law enforcement officials, and what appeared to be bribery records for insiders. It was a digital blueprint for criminal dominance, methodically organized by a man obsessed with control. And yet, the one thing they needed most was missing: Oliver himself. There was no sign of forced entry or a rushed exit. His wardrobe was full. The refrigerator was stocked. It was as if he had simply stepped out for the day and never returned. No flights booked, no passport activity, no known border crossings. Facial recognition scans turned up nothing. Traffic cameras offered no leads. Despite the mountain of evidence and the rapid unraveling of his empire, Oliver had disappeared without leaving a trace. The man behind the phantom was now truly living up to the name. Weeks turned into months, and the search intensified, but it became increasingly clear to investigators that he hadn't run in panic. He had planned this. Every step, every detail. He didn't vanish because he was cornered. He vanished because it was time. As the weeks stretched into months, Oliver Barrett became more than a fugitive. He became a legend. Despite the unprecedented scale of the investigation, no one could find a trace of him. His bank accounts were drained before authorities could freeze them. His vehicles were abandoned. His digital footprint went completely dark. No phone signals, no credit card use, no online activity. He had disappeared as completely as if he had never existed at all. Interpol issued a red notice. His name and photo were sent to every border agency in Europe. A reward of £2 million was offered for information leading to his capture. Rumors poured in from across the world. Some claimed he was hiding in the United Arab Emirates, living under a new identity with plastic surgery and a new passport. Others were certain he'd made his way into the jungles of South America, protected by local gangs in exchange for a slice of his fortune. A few whispered that he had never left Britain at all, that he was living somewhere in plain sight with a beard, a new name and a quiet job no one would question. Yet despite thousands of tips, none led anywhere. Every reported sighting turned cold. Every supposed lead ended in nothing. He was simply gone. Law enforcement agencies were forced to admit, behind closed doors, that they were no closer to catching him than they had been when he was just a myth. Even as the arrests and trials of his former associates moved forward, a strange silence settled over the investigation. Without Oliver, there was no closure, For many, his escape became the final chapter in his carefully written story. He hadn't just run from justice, he had planned for it. Investigators began to realize that Oliver had likely anticipated every possible outcome. He had watched what happened to other drug lords, learned from their failures, and built his exit strategy long before anyone had even started looking for him. The mystery of his disappearance became as infamous as his crimes. Documentaries speculated about secret tunnels, fake deaths, and offshore villas, but no proof ever surfaced. The man known as the Phantom had done the impossible. built a criminal empire, controlled it without ever being seen, and then vanished, leaving behind only questions, chaos, and the chilling feeling that he might still be watching. The stunning betrayal that ultimately unraveled Oliver Barrett's empire came from an unexpected place, someone he trusted deeply. For years Oliver had built his network on secrecy and loyalty, but even the most carefully guarded systems have weak points. That weak point was Hannah, a brilliant coder who had joined the operation early on. Quiet, unassuming, and fiercely loyal, she was responsible for maintaining the encryption protocols that kept the Phantom's communications hidden from prying eyes. What no one realized was that Hannah was living a double life. Underneath her calm exterior, she was struggling with a growing sense of guilt. The deeper she dug into the operation's dark realities, the lives destroyed, the addicts lost, the violence quietly enforced, the harder it became for her to justify her silence. When Jay was arrested and turned informant, Hannah's fears grew. She knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Hannah made a choice that shocked everyone. She approached law enforcement with detailed knowledge of Oliver's systems, his communication methods, and the identities of several trusted lieutenants. Her cooperation was kept secret, and her information proved critical. Thanks to her, authorities gained access to layers of encrypted servers they had never penetrated before. They uncovered hidden financial trails, secret drop points, and even audio recordings. Oliver never intended anyone to hear. But what truly rocked the nation was what Hannah revealed about Oliver himself. He wasn't just a remote figure manipulating from afar. He was deeply involved in every aspect of the empire. Ruthless in his decisions, yet surprisingly cold and methodical. Hannah's testimony portrayed a man who was as much a criminal mastermind as he was a cold strategist, someone who valued control above all else and viewed people as expendable pieces on a chessboard. Her betrayal turned the tide of the investigation. Trials that had stalled finally moved forward with overwhelming evidence. Former associates who once feared the Phantom began to speak out. Emboldened by Hannah's courage, public interest exploded, revealing the human cost behind the headlines. Families shattered, communities devastated, lives ruined. In the end, the Phantom's downfall wasn't caused by a dramatic police raid or an undercover operation, but by one person's decision to expose the truth. It was a reminder that even the most powerful empires built on fear and secrecy can be broken by the unexpected courage of a single individual. And while Oliver Barrett may have vanished, his story and the lessons it holds will not be forgotten.